So this is an interesting clip that I'm about to show you. This is the man who ousted Eric Cantor from Congress. Now remember, Eric Cantor was in GOP leadership, and nobody was talking about him potentially losing. But in the Tea Party wave, he lost. Why? Because he was viewed as a more establishment politician, and this guy David Brat came along. Now David Brat is a far right winger, as you're about to see. But there was one aspect to David Brat that was way more appealing compared to Eric Cantor, which is David Brat oftentimes spoke about the lobbyists and the corporations and their influence on politicians and on Eric Cantor. And so he ran a more populist campaign, and he was able to oust a Republican leader. So fast forward to today, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez did the same thing to Joe Crowley. So Fox News invites on David Brat to talk about what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez did, and this back and forth is hideous.
This person knows a thing or two about shocking the political world. Republican Congressman David Brat of Virginia scored his own stunning upset when he ousted then-Majority Leader Eric Cantor 4 years ago. Congressman Brat joins us now. Always great to see you. The similarities, tell me about them.
Yeah, hey, Harris, great to be with you. Well, I always applaud the underdog. You got to love the underdog spirit. She was completely outfunded. That's great. She got around the district. That's great. But there are interesting. I was glad to hear her just saying, not running on the crony, special interest, lobby money, all that. She wasn't chosen by the machine. Hillary was chosen by the machine. Bernie wasn't. And it was rigged against Bernie. So the underdog wins in this case. But it's interesting. She's against the crony class and lobbyists, et cetera. But she's a socialist. And that, I taught economics for 20 years, and so you give up one set of special interests for another. I mean, they want total control of the government, right? They want to socialize health care. Obamacare is, just steps on the way to you losing your freedom. And so I don't get that New Yorkers and that individual spirit up there is going for socialism and total government control. Someone's always in charge of the government, right? There's no utopian government in the Soviet Union or other communist socialist societies. Someone's in control, and there's always a crony network of who's friends with who, unfortunately, and that's why it never works anywhere it's been tried in the world. So some similarities, but major differences. The anger of the progressives. I had town hall. They're all swearing during the prayer at my town hall. They've moved way left, right? JFK was a Massachusetts Democrat liberal in the old classical Democrat liberal, but he was proud of his Judeo-Christian tradition, his Catholic faith. He was strong on defense, strong on sovereignty. He was for tax cuts. I mean, what has happened to the Democrat Party when you have that move away from just an icon in JFK to what's going on now? It's an unrecognizable party in favor of socialism against private property rights. I mean, the young kids and a lot of people don't know what socialism is anymore because it's been so debunked by history. It's failed everywhere. But the left is just on a rant lately. And so that's what we got coming at us. Yep.
Yeah. So what you're talking about, I mean, you can look at the tests that the world is giving it around, Venezuela.
Right. They are a caricature. They're a parody of themselves. I mean, they really are like, those dolls where you pull the string and then it just says the same thing over and over. That's what it is. They don't have any actual responses to somebody who's on the populist left, a Justice Democrat like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. So they go back to the same points over and over. And it reminds me of, I've mentioned this before on air, but when Jerry Falwell died, a Christian fundamentalist, televangelist, Christopher Hitchens went on Sean Hannity's show, and Sean Hannity kept bringing up like the most tired, ridiculous, debunked arguments in favor of God. And Christopher Hitchens responded with something along the lines of, "You give me the terrible impression of somebody who's never read a counter-argument to your position." And that's literally what happens every time I see a clip of a Republican politician or a right-wing pundit or commentator trying to argue against either social democracy or democratic socialism or, a hybrid mixed market economy that's further left on the political spectrum. They have no rebuttal to it. So what they do is they just smear and they straw man. So the smear and the straw man here is Soviet Union, Venezuela. Of course. Yeah, it's been debunked so many times throughout history. I don't know why they'd be trying it again. I mean, look at Soviet Union. Look at Venezuela. Again, they will never, ever, 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 ever say, look at Denmark, look at Norway, look at Iceland, look at Sweden. They'd never say, look at how Canada's further to the left on the political spectrum than us and how they're doing over there. By the way, the American dream is now the Canadian dream. I don't know if you heard that story from about a year or two ago, but now the economic mobility, social mobility, is now more likely for people to happen in Canada than in the U.S. So if you're born into a lower class, your chances of escaping that and getting into a higher economic class, going up that rung of the economic ladder, it's more likely that that happens in Canada than in America. So the American dream is now the Canadian dream. Okay, and what do they have? Well, for example, one of the things they have is universal health care. So they can't respond to that point like, oh, hey, we're just trying to make this country more Scandinavian in terms of the politics. That's it. We're trying to have universal health care, universal education, maybe throw daycare in there, and the stupid wars, rebuild our infrastructure, and the drug war, do things like that. They don't have a response to that. So what they do is just Venezuela. Soviet Union. So they're not even bothering to try to make distinctions between an authoritarian system of government versus a libertarian system of government. Communism versus socialism. Socialism versus democratic socialism. Democratic socialism versus social democracy. Blah, 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 blah. They don't know what the fuck they're talking about. I like how he says, she's against the crony class and lobbyists, but she's a socialist. That makes no sense. Well, actually, it does make sense if you bothered to give a fuck to ever read anything that counters your fucking ideology and your narrative, you Ayn Rand libertarian goon. So, yes, there's a lot less corruption in the social democracies. Again, look at Scandinavia. They have much less corruption than we do in America. So, no, the idea that, like, you're trading one special interest class for another. No. In the U.S., the special interests being served are corporations and defense contractors and things of that nature. And the special interest class being served in the social democracies is the people. So, okay, yeah, you're right. One special interest class versus another. One special interest is the people who you should be serving. That's called democracy. The other special interest class, again, pharmaceutical companies, for-profit health insurance companies, Wall Street, military-industrial complex. And that's the problem. And then he says universal health care is you losing your freedom. The old Ben Shapiro argument. Ben Shapiro has literally argued like, you know, my wife's a doctor and apparently you want to make her a slave because you're in favor of universal health care. Did you really let those words pass through your mouth? So it went from your brain out your mouth. There should be a filter somewhere in there along the way, but you didn't. You just had verbal diarrhea all over the place. Making my wife a slave by having Medicare for all. That's the dumbest fucking thing I've ever. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. It's a matter of funding. How are you going to fund it? Through tax dollars or not? Well, when you fund it through tax dollars, when you do a Medicare for all system, a single-payer healthcare system, those are the best systems in the world by far and away. And you cover everybody. And you eliminate this thing called medical bankruptcies, which are a giant issue in the United States, and they're not anywhere else. We also have 45,000 people die every year because they don't have access to basic health care. But Ben Shapiro's counter-argument to empirically looking at the healthcare systems around the world, and David Brat's counter-argument is, you lose your freedom if you do universal health care. They are so off the spectrum as they hilariously pontificate about how Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is off the spectrum when she is squarely in the middle of public opinion with her policy beliefs. And then finally, he says, well, they're against property rights. No, we're not against property rights. We're in favor of a mixed market economy, like every developed economy in the world. So these guys, don't get me wrong, they think that any form of taxation is theft. That's how they think. So therefore, any form of taxation is immoral and wrong, and that means you don't believe in property rights. So okay, then nobody believes in property rights. No modern thinker. The only people that believe in property rights by that logic are anarcho-capitalists, okay, which is like fucking nobody, because we already know how ridiculous that system is. So The reality is, no, of course, she's not coming to fucking confiscate your car or confiscate your house or do anything like that. She's just in favor of having a mixed market economy. And she's in favor of a system that's a mixed market economy that reflects the systems in the world that are objectively the best. The best in terms of how they rank with their healthcare systems, how they rank with their quality of life, how they rank with happiness. Every time the UN does the World Happiness Report, riddled in the top 10 are the Scandinavian countries, the social democracies. But again, they don't have an answer to all of this, so what they do is strawman. Venezuela, Soviet Union, you don't like property rights. Please come up with some new material, and please come up with something mildly convincing. This isn't remotely convincing by any stretch of the imagination. So actually, you know what? I shouldn't tell them to come up with new arguments. Keep using these shitty ones, and then this is why the left will win. Justice Democrats will win if the Democratic Party is a Justice Democratic Party, and the Republican Party is full of jackasses like this. We would destroy them. The only time that we lose is if we have the corporate neoliberal centrists in power. That's when the Democrats lose.